Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thank you so much for coming along for the ride of this podcast that is designed to be a resource for those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society is a forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. My name is Thom Singer, and I have the honor to be the co-host of this show along with Craig Brown, an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors. Hey, Craig, how are you today?
I'm great, Tom. The buzz in the back room. It's been an interesting day today at this conference. Learning a lot. It's interesting ideas.
We have been here at ConX 19, and so Craig and I have been able to do several live in-person interviews, which is a lot of fun because we get to sit here with the people who we're interviewing. And today we are bringing you one of those interviews live from San Diego, although I guess not live because it's taped. But each week we try very hard to bring to this podcast interesting interviews and other ideas that will help all the listeners enhance and grow their careers. And today is no different because we have Peter Schroer, who is the CEO and founder of Aras. Hey, Peter, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
So, Peter, what's your backstory? How did you get to founding Aras? What did you do before? And then tell us a little bit about what is Aras.
Okay, so Aras is now, well, coming out end of this year, it'll be 20 years. So I was the founder of Aras. How did I get there? That's a really good question. I'm an electrical engineer, a little bit unusual for the PLM space. We tend to be a bunch of gearheads. I am an electrical engineer. I also went to Cornell, got out of Cornell, actually worked at IBM for a short while. Anybody who's got a browser in front of them can Google the scanning tunneling microscope.
Oh, wow.
Nobel Prize for Physics.
Okay.
Right? I wasn't mentioned. I just built it, right? The guys with the PhDs, they got the Nobel Prize. I went from there to Data General.
Okay.
Right? So Data General, computer manufacturer, of course, no longer existing. I spent 8 years in manufacturing, design, supply chain. All right. Now, you're going to ask, how did I get into PLM? Well, that's actually it. I was intimately in the process of how do we get designs into manufacturing? How do we get them built properly? At different points, I was the dock control manager, the ECO coordinator. I ran the CAD and automation department in design for a while. And I was there when Data General basically closed all their manufacturing plants and outsourced manufacturing. So if you want to get intimate with product data, it's how do you get an outsider to understand what the heck you're trying to build?
Right.
I went from Data General, you could think the time frame, this was, okay, it's a long time ago, about 30 years ago. There weren't PDM systems. Matter of fact, a vendor showed up one day with an early system he called Metaphase, right? And we took a look at that. And I ended up leaving Data General at so about 8 years, went to a small software company. So I went from the end user to the dark side. And it was Workgroup technology, and we were one of the first small PDMs. That one was focused on managing Pro Engineer. Learn how to work with customers, learn how to configure and manage PLM projects, and went from there to Eigner+Partner, German PLM.
Right.
Right. Okay. So sounds like a nice career in PDM. How do you start a company? Well, typical. Didn't like my boss. Didn't like the direction. Right. Vision was wrong. Right. Complaining all the time. And my wife one day just says, I'm really tired of hearing you say that boss sucks, or this business, the vision was wrong, or the tech. You just need to go do your own thing. And Karen and I literally quit our day jobs. This was December 1999, and January 2000, we hung a shingle outside the front door and started building a new PLM platform.
And that's Aras?
That is Aras.
Interesting.
Well, that's not Aras. Aras was my daughter, Sarah, who actually provided the name for the company.
Did everybody get that?
Yeah.
Listen carefully. Spell it backwards. You'll figure it out.
You got it. So, little Sarah, as our VP of marketing, I guess at the time, at 3 years old, knew how to spell her name backwards. And I'm like,
wow.
No, that actually works.
That's a good piece of trivia.
That is. That's Aras trivia. The good news is at most events we go to, when they list the, who the vendors here, we're on top. We're always above Siemens, Dassault, and PTC. Where we belong.
And you've earned that in some cases, but we'll talk about that later.
At this point, 20 years ago, it was very different.
That's right.
We were a classic bootstrap. So it was two people working, generating enough money from, actually I was doing consulting on other PLM systems, take the checks that were coming in, throw them over my shoulder, and Karen was building a development team. One developer, 3 months later, two developers, 3 months later. And we just literally bootstrapped the company up until mid-2003 timeframe, venture capital, and then later private equity and Goldman Sachs, and that's where we are today.
So Peter, the evolution of Aras the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So, I ended my professional career at General Motors a few months ago, and you and I got to know each other over these past 3 years. I remember a discussion here in the Southern California area in 2016 with Microsoft.
Yes.
And GM and Microsoft, we went over to the corner and we had a healthy discussion about the future of PLM, and your company kept coming up, right? And so I was interested to hear from your perspective, has the growth in interest in Aras been what you expected? Has it surprised you? And or what else is on your mind about that?
Yeah, I'm continuously surprised, but that's when you start a company, right, as we did in 2000, it's very difficult to imagine. You can dream, but it's hard to picture what happens. And one of the things that was difficult to picture is that it takes, until about 2014, 14 years to build the platform, start to get a brand. And at that point, we were, up until the first 14 years, we were selling to SMB. So GM never would have heard of us.
Right.
Microsoft never would have heard of us. But we were building reputation and getting use cases and working on the software. 2014 for us was the proverbial startup hockey stick.
Okay.
2014, we shifted from selling to mid-market to saying, now let's just take the same software and go after the larger customers.
Interesting.
And that was our breakthrough.
Okay.
So the Aras is actually, it's not a PLM system, right? As if a PLM could be an application. The whole idea here was to create first a platform. In a sense, it's a low-code development platform that doesn't know what PLM is at all. On top of the platform, we've built applications which fit into PLM.
Okay.
Things you might know, BOM management,
Right.
CAD visualization, CAD management. Those would be applications in the PLM space.
Okay.
But we also do requirements management, arguably maybe not in the PLM space. We now have a maintenance, repair, and overhaul application for aircraft. Again, not necessarily PLM. So we've taken the same platform and we've just rolled out with our community application after application after application.
Interesting.
So a little bit broader than PLM maybe. Yep.
So we're here at the ConX 19, and the pace of change has been a constant topic here the first day. And you ended the day with your keynote, and you were pointing out a couple things we really need to consider. One of the things I found fascinating was whether the configuration management practices were good enough anymore. Expand on that a bit.
So let's not say good enough.
Oh, okay.
Maybe are they ready for what's coming next?
Okay.
And I think
And why are you concerned about readiness?
So first, I'm a big believer in configuration management.
Okay.
And if you think about what does the Aras platform do, it's effectively a configuration management platform that allows you to adapt from old world where we're managing versions of drawings to then CAD files to now systems, right? So the evolution of CM, that's what I was trying to get across in my presentation today, that we spent decades in configuration management managing mechanical 2D drawings.
Right.
Right. We're about 2 decades now into managing 3D CAD. Right. And as we move towards model-based design, we're going to lose drawings. Right. The designers don't want to do those anymore. Well, that was the artifact we used to manage in CM. That's the first change. But actually, it's coming fast and furious. The products that we're shipping, that GM is shipping, it's as much electronics and software as mechanical. I maybe should even modify that.
Well, I'm going to talk about that on Wednesday. It is more, but keep going.
What we're hearing in a lot of industries that the software content has now surpassed mechanical in terms of the IP, But that's only half the interesting part. But the risk introduced into products is driven more by the software content than the mechanical content at this point.
Right.
And then the third vector there is the features that the customers are buying are now more of the software than the mechanical.
So I'm glad you brought up features, if I may. We were chatting with Microsoft on these things about the way they are using PLM to manage their cloud services, right? And feature management came up.
Yes.
I was just ecstatic, right? Because as you know, we've been chatting about feature management with a few key tool vendors as well as other partners like Microsoft. And I'm interested that this is becoming more of the topic. So a second point you made was about the frequency of change. Changing these features is like really fast.
Continuous, yes.
Yeah, well, that's a better word.
Let's think agile, right? And yeah, absolutely. And now put that in this audience's context.
Right.
They're managing configuration management of products in a cadence that was propose a design change. I got to get a new fixture. I've got to ramp up the suppliers. Nice leisurely kind of once a week to once a month kind of changes.
Or once a year.
Yeah. And then software happened. Right. And now these guys literally on the shop floor are dealing with daily, hourly changes. I remember working CM consulting to the V22 Osprey around the 1999 timeframe. Mechanical completely under control. Bell was very proud of that. Right. And software changes coming so fast, they did not know which version of software was in each bird going out the back dock.
Right.
It just you also you can't see it.
Right.
The inspectors on the floor.
That is part of the problem. You can't visualize it.
You can't visualize. Right. And if all your quality and inspection and CM procedures are based on, I can look and there's a tag and it says version 2, I know I'm good.
Okay.
How do I know it's embedded software?
So frequency differences. And the fact that configuration management, change management is still really important. Yep. Does this mean these can be in a common system or a common process, or does it mean there be collaborating processes?
No, so
what do you think?
This was my proposal to the CM community that we're talking to here at IPX, the Connex 19, is we need as a community to get ahead of this, right? It absolutely has to be the same system. And that's what Aras is building towards, is I've got to be able to manage the mechanical design, change cadence, the electronic, and the software in one system, right? So that product configuration, and you come from a business where the product lasts quite a long time out in the field and is modified out in the field. The aerospace, where we also do business, it's even longer, right?
Right.
That design process never stops. Right. You're continuously changing product, and sometimes it only changes a piece of software. I mean, I understand now.
And we're talking software inside a car.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? That's what you and I are thinking about. But in fact, as we bring more services to bear, more features to bear, the back office that supports all that, the data collection, the IoT side of this thing, actually that matters too. And so we better be able to configure all that.
And it better match what the product is. What the product is configured and sending data. Yeah, absolutely. So this is what I think of as the CM challenge. Right? I think it's an awesome opportunity for this community, right, to innovate, reinvent themselves, right, and get ahead of this, such this digital transformation journey we're all on doesn't crash and burn.
Yeah. Well, I liked your words this afternoon on resilience. So instead of threads, twins, all these other digital terms, how about digital resiliency?
Yes.
Is that the answer?
I like the term because resiliency actually is part of our vernacular. Right? When we talk about how do you build IT systems for a world that's changing, you have to build resilient systems, systems that themselves can change and still be stable. Digital transformation, I think you just coined a good term. Now I have digital resiliency. I like it.
Well, you and I can use it. We'll see how fast everybody else picks up on it.
We'll see who's listening to the podcast, and as they echo back digital resiliency, we know.
Millions and millions of people are listening to the podcast.
This is big. All right, good.
You might have exaggerated. Okay, well, this is great chatting with you. I always learn something when we get together. I look forward to the next opportunity. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us with? We're the Digital Enterprise Society, and you guys are one of those people making a difference in this space, what is it you'd like them to know, the Digital Enterprise Society?
So I think what's underplayed for a long, long time. We send our engineers to school and they become mechanical engineers or they become electrical engineers. Today we do not do a good job creating engineers.
You mean systems engineers?
Systems engineers. I didn't want to say the word systems engineers because that's also a discipline.
Broader, you're right.
Engineers.
Broader thinking.
I mean, actually, for the first time today, I was talking with Nate Hartman at Purdue, and they are quite literally for the first time teaching freshmen PLM.
Yeah.
That's never happened before. So I think we're on the edge of realizing that digital resiliency requires a different skill set, right? And the people in this audience that we met today, they're in the CM world. They're almost on the edge of it. But what we'd really like to see is people step up, start to think as systems thinking. We say at Aras, right? But I like the resiliency. We've got to think about planning for and accommodating change.
Okay.
That becomes careers.
That's really interesting. I look forward to our next discussion. Thom?
So actually, where you sort of ended leads me to the question I always try to do. I try to wrap a lot of these discussions back around from the career standpoint of the people in the Digital Enterprise Society and other people who stumble upon and listen to this podcast. What advice then do you have for that worker, that engineer who is listening to this, who wants to grow their career? I mean, obviously for 20 years, you've had your own company. You obviously have a lot of experience before that, but you've hired people, you've promoted people. What is the advice you have for the listeners when it comes to their career?
So number one, so what we look at, and we're 520 employees today, which again, never imagined that 20 years ago, but right, 520 employees. What we promote, what we hire for and what we promote is the attitude, right, for change. You've got to be willing to get out of your comfort zone, right? Be willing to learn, right? The skills on the tangential to where you've been, but you've got to be willing to try. I think I had an old mentor years and years ago told me it was about attitude, not aptitude, right? And I think that's absolutely right. You want to build a career, you've got to have the attitude that I'm going to change, I'm going to challenge myself, or as my wife told me, shut up and stop whining and just start your company, right? Yeah. You've got to jump in and do it. That's what careers come out of.
That's great advice. And that's what's been so great about this whole Connex 19 and IPX is just the things that we've been able to garner in these interviews face-to-face and to learn, I think has been very good for the podcast. So thank you, Peter, for joining us.
Thank you for the time. That's great.
Hey, and for those of you who are listening, join us next week for more thoughts, ideas, and information in and around product lifecycle management. The Digital Enterprise Society is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Check us out at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more Connection Without Boundaries.